6 animals more valuable than chickens on a small farm. Hello friends, and welcome back to Farmyard Care. If you're here today, there's a good chance you're the kind of person who feels at home with soil on your hands and a growing plan in your mind. Maybe you're working with a small backyard, a modest homestead, or just a few raised beds in a dream that keeps getting bigger. Maybe you want food that feels real, work that feels meaningful, and a life that is a little slower, steadier, and closer to the land. And if that sounds like you, then you've probably heard the same advice again and again. Start with chickens. It's the standard answer. It feels simple, familiar, and safe. But after many years of working with gardens, soil health, animal systems, and small-scale growing, I can tell you this with confidence. The most useful animal on a small farm is not always the one everyone talks about most. Some animals do far more than produce food. They help restore land, protect crops, reduce pests, improve fertility, and make a small space work harder without making your life harder. That is where true value begins. So in today's video, we're going to look beyond the chicken coop and talk about 6 animals that can bring even more to a small farm, especially for those of you with limited space, limited time, and a real desire to build something resilient. If you enjoy practical, thoughtful ideas for growing food and creating a more self-sufficient life, subscribe to Farmyard Care and let's get into it. Part 1. The Micro Space Marvels. Number 1. Quail, the quiet kings of efficiency. Now that we've opened the door to thinking beyond chickens, let's start with the challenge that stops so many people before they ever begin: space. A lot of folks picture homesteading as something that only works if you have wide pasture, a big red barn, and room to spread out. But in reality, many of the most determined growers are working with small backyards, side yards, garages, sheds, or narrow corners of land where every square foot has to earn its place. And that is exactly where quail begin to shine. Coturnix quail may be small, but they are one of the smartest animals you can raise when space is limited and efficiency matters. They do not need large coops, open pasture, or elaborate housing to thrive. Give them a clean, secure, well-managed setup, and they can produce remarkably well in a compact area that would never comfortably support a flock of chickens. For people living in suburban neighborhoods or building a quiet backyard system, that alone makes them worth serious attention. But the real advantage goes beyond space. It is speed. Chickens ask you to be patient for months before they begin to lay. Quail move on a completely different timeline. In as little as 6 to 8 weeks, they are already producing eggs. That means faster returns, quicker learning, and a much more encouraging start for anyone trying to build confidence without wasting time or feed. And those eggs may be small, but they carry real value. They are rich, nutritious, attractive, and often highly sought after by home cooks, chefs, and families looking for something a little different. Best of all, quail do all of this quietly. No loud crowing, no early morning noise, no constant disturbance. They let you raise quality protein in peace. And once you understand that, you begin to see something important. Abundance does not always begin with more land. Sometimes it begins with a better choice. Part 2. The Silent Protein Engine. Number 2. Meat rabbits, the precision protein engine. Once you realize that limited space does not have to limit your options, the next question becomes much more practical. How do you produce real food in a way that is steady, affordable, and sustainable over time? For many families trying to become more self-reliant, that question usually leads straight to protein. Meat prices continue to rise, grocery quality can be inconsistent, and raising large livestock is simply not realistic for most small farms. That is where rabbits enter the picture, quietly, efficiently, and with far more value than many beginners expect. Rabbits are not dramatic animals. They do not call attention to themselves, and they do not require the kind of setup that overwhelms a small property. But from a production standpoint, they are one of the most efficient animals you can raise. They convert simple resources like hay, garden trimmings, kitchen scraps, and moderate feed into lean, clean meat in a surprisingly short amount of time. Instead of waiting many months or even years for results, rabbits move quickly. A well-managed trio can produce multiple litters across the year, and in just 8 to 10 weeks, those young rabbits can already become a meaningful source of food for the household. But what makes rabbits especially valuable on a small farm is not only the meat, it is the way they fit so naturally into a garden-centered system. Their manure is one of the most useful forms of fertility a grower can have. Unlike chicken manure, which is too hot to apply fresh, rabbit manure can go straight into the garden without a long composting period. It feeds the soil gently, supports plant growth, and helps build the kind of living ground that keeps producing season after season. And that is where the real beauty of rabbits reveals itself. They do not just feed your family, they also feed the soil that grows the greens, roots, and forage that can support the next cycle. In a truly resilient backyard farm, that kind of loop matters more than people realize. Rabbits prove that some of the strongest systems are not the loudest or the biggest. They are the ones that work quietly, cleanly, and again and again. Part 3. The Garden Guardians. Number 3. Ducks, the elegant pest patrollers. Once your small farm begins producing food well, a new challenge always follows close behind: protecting what you have worked so hard to grow. Anyone who has tended a garden knows the feeling. Your greens are finally full and healthy, your tomatoes are setting fruit, and then almost overnight the pests arrive. Slugs, snails, beetles, and all the quiet destroyers seem to appear the moment your plants look their best. For many people, the first instinct is to reach for chemical sprays. Others think they can simply turn chickens loose and let them handle the problem. But if you have ever watched chickens in a garden bed, you already know they often do as much damage as the pests themselves. This is where ducks offer something far more balanced. Ducks move through a garden in a completely different way. They do not tear through mulch, scratch up roots, or send young plants into shock. Instead, they patrol with steady purpose, searching for slugs and insects with those broad bills, cleaning up trouble without turning the soil into chaos. They become part of the rhythm of the garden rather than a disruption to it. And that difference matters more than most people expect. Ducks are especially useful in places where the weather is wet, cool, or unpredictable. Rain does not slow them down. Damp ground does not bother them. In fact, they often remain active and productive when chickens start to struggle. Their hardiness makes them a dependable choice for growers who need animals that can keep working through rougher seasons. And then, of course, there are the eggs. Duck eggs are larger, richer, and prized by many bakers for their deep flavor and excellent texture. Which means ducks are not just helping protect the harvest, they are adding another valuable food source to the farm. What I love most about ducks is the lesson they carry with them. They remind us that protection does not always have to look harsh or forceful. Sometimes the healthiest garden is not defended with chemicals or constant intervention. Sometimes it is supported by the right living partner, moving quietly through the rows and helping nature hold its own balance. Part 4. The Land Restorers. Number 4. Dairy goats, the poor man's cow. As we move beyond the garden beds and look at the rougher edges of a small farm, another question comes into focus. What do you do with the parts of your land that seem to fight you every step of the way? The fence lines covered in brush, the patches of thorny growth, the invasive plants creeping into useful space, the overgrown corners that demand your labor but give very little back. For many people, those areas become a constant burden, and at the same time, many families dream of producing their own milk, but quickly realize that a full-size cow asks for more space, more feed, more money, and better pasture than a small property can realistically provide. That is where the dairy goat becomes such a remarkable animal. People have called her the poor man's cow for generations, and there is real truth in that name. A good dairy goat can offer milk, fertility, and land-clearing power all at once, which makes her one of the most practical animals a small farm can keep. The key is understanding what goats really are. They are browsers, not grazers. They do not want to spend their day nibbling short grass like cattle. They want brambles, vines, shrubs, weeds, and woody growth. In other words, they thrive on the very things most landowners are trying to get rid of. That changes everything. Instead of burning fuel, swinging tools, or spraying chemicals to reclaim neglected ground, goats can do the work naturally. They open dense areas, knock back unwanted growth, and help bring air and light back to the soil. And while they are doing that, they are also producing rich, useful milk that can become cheese, yogurt, soap, and other staples of a truly self-reliant home. Their manure, like rabbit manure, is also valuable for improving the soil. But goats offer something more than output. They bring personality, intelligence, and connection. Working with a dairy goat is not just another task on the farm. It becomes a daily relationship, and for many people, that quiet milking routine turns into one of the most grounding parts of the day. Part 5. The unseen workforce. Number 5. Honeybees, the passive income pollinators. After talking about animals that ask for your daily attention, it is only natural to wonder whether there is something you can add to your small farm that gives back in a big way without demanding more from every single morning. And that question leads us to one of the most overlooked and extraordinary partners a grower can have: the honeybee. Honeybees change the rhythm of a homestead in a way that few other animals can. Most livestock depend on you constantly. They need feed carried, water checked, bedding replaced, and fences maintained. Bees operate differently. Once their hive is healthy and well placed, they move with a kind of ancient purpose, following bloom cycles, weather patterns, and instinct older than any farming method we have written down. They leave the hive each day and work a landscape far bigger than the one you can manage with your own hands, gathering value from fields, trees, wildflowers, and hedgerows all around you. But the real power of bees is not only in the honey they make, it is in the invisible work they do while your garden grows. As they move from flower to flower, they increase pollination across your property, helping fruit trees set better, vegetables produce more heavily, and the entire growing system become more productive. In a very real sense, bees connect everything. They tie blossoms to harvest, effort to reward, and your small patch of land to the wider living world around it. And then, of course, comes the harvest itself. A strong hive can reward you with honey, one of the most remarkable foods a homestead can produce, rich in flavor, naturally long-lasting, and deeply valued in any self-sufficient household. Beeswax adds even more usefulness, turning into candles, salves, and practical handmade goods. For the busy grower, that is a powerful lesson. Not all abundance comes from harder labor. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is build the right conditions, step back, and let nature work in your favor. Importantly, the biological shield. Number 6, guinea fowl, the ultimate biological security. By this point, we have talked about animals that help feed the household, improve the soil, restore overgrown land, and raise the productivity of the garden. But there is one more need every small farm eventually has to face, and that is protection. Because once you begin building something valuable, whether it is a flock, a garden, or a more self-sufficient way of life, you also begin to notice how much of the natural world is trying to take a share of it. Hawks circle overhead, foxes move at the edge of the property, coyotes test the weak spots, and in the grass beneath your feet, ticks wait quietly where you cannot always see them. This is where guinea fowl earn their reputation, and to be fair, they are not subtle birds. Guinea fowl are loud, alert, restless, and impossible to ignore. They react to movement, noise, sudden changes, and anything that feels out of place. For some people, that can be a challenge, But on a small farm that values awareness and early warning, that same behavior becomes one of their greatest strengths. Guinea fowl do not just live on the land, they monitor it. They act like a living alarm system, announcing threats from the sky and the ground before your other birds even understand what is happening. What makes them even more valuable is that their usefulness does not stop with predators. Guinea fowl are relentless foragers, constantly moving through the property in search of ticks, grasshoppers, and other pests that create real problems for both animals and people. They cover ground with purpose, reducing unwanted insects without digging up beds or tearing apart the garden in the process. In that sense, they create a kind of biological barrier around the home, one that helps reduce disease risk while also strengthening the safety of the flock. And that is why so many experienced homesteaders learn to appreciate them. Guinea fowl may not be peaceful or polished, but they bring a level of security that few other birds can match. Sometimes the best protection on a farm does not come from walls or chemicals. Sometimes it comes feathered, watchful, and louder than you ever expected. The invisible animal, the system. Now, before you rush off and decide which of these animals belongs on your land first, there is one more truth we need to talk about, and in many ways, it matters more than all the rest. We have covered quail, rabbits, ducks, goats, bees, and guinea fowl. But the real reason some small farms thrive for decades while others fall apart after a short burst of excitement has less to do with the animals themselves and more to do with the system behind them. This is what I call the invisible animal, the system. Because in real life, most small farms do not fail from lack of good ideas. They fail from too many ideas introduced too quickly. A person gets inspired, starts imagining fresh eggs, homemade cheese, honey, pest control, brush clearing, and suddenly the dream becomes a pile of chores, rising feed costs, half-finished projects, and constant fatigue. What began as a search for peace turns into pressure. The most resilient growers understand something that takes time to learn. A strong farm is built in layers. You do not create stability by adding everything at once. You choose one system, learn it deeply, and carry it through the changing seasons. You see how it performs in heat, in cold, in rain, in busy weeks, and in hard weeks. You understand its needs, its limits, and the way it fits your land and your daily life. Only then do you add the next piece. And there is one part of that system people overlook far too often: the farmer. You. Land responds to steady care, but so does the human being managing it. If you are exhausted, discouraged, and running on strain alone, even good soil and good animals cannot carry the whole burden. Rest is not laziness. Recovery is not weakness. If you want your farm to become a lasting home instead of a heavy load, you have to protect your own strength with the same intention you give your land. At the end of the day, there is no single perfect formula for building a small farm. The world loves simple answers, and most of the time that answer sounds the same. Just do what everyone else is doing. But real farming, the kind that lasts, has never been about copying the crowd. It has always been about paying close attention to your own land, your own limits, and the kind of life you are truly trying to build. A successful small farm is not defined by how many acres you own or how much you produce in one season. It is defined by balance. Does your land feed your family well? Does your system support your time, your energy, and your peace of mind? Does the work leave you tired in a good way or only overwhelmed? Those are the questions that matter. Because when your choices begin to match the natural rhythm of your place, the farm stops feeling like a burden you must carry and starts feeling like a home that carries you too. So now I would love to hear from you. Which of these 6 animals surprised you the most? And what is the biggest challenge standing between you and a more self-sufficient life? Share it down in the comments, because some of the best lessons come from hearing each other's real experiences. If this video gave you a fresh perspective, brought you value, or simply helped you think about your land in a new way, Please like this video and subscribe to Farmyard Care. Thank you so much for being here. Be patient with your land, be patient with yourself, keep learning, keep growing, and I'll see you in the next video.